Howdy everyone, my name's Chris and today I'm looking at a rather groundbreaking camera lens for APS-C digital cameras. The Sigma 8 to 16mm f4.5 to 5.6 DC HSM. And here it is. I found mine for about £400 or $600, so it's not a small investment. It stands out from the crowd by being a super ultra wide angle lens. Most ultra-wide-angle lenses zoom out to about 10mm. However, this Sigma lens handily trumps that, going down to 8mm, which is considerably wider. For a rectilinear or non-fisheye lens, that's mightily impressive, so this is definitely an exciting piece of kit for wide-angle photography junkies like me. At 8mm, your field of view is simply enormous, and you can create images that distort everyday subjects in all sorts of interesting ways, like this Mini. As a result, this is a very fun lens to play with, but it can also be very useful in all kinds of projects. Most people will buy this lens just to get down to 8mm, but it's good to see that it can also zoom into 16mm. The limitation of this lens's design is that it only has a maximum aperture of f4.5 to 5.6 as you zoom in, so it doesn't let in much light. But an issue like that is forgivable when you're dealing with a trailblazing piece of kit. This lens does not have image stabilization. First off, let's look at the build quality. This lens is put together extremely well. It's quite big and very solid and weighty. It has a beautiful curved front element. Pretty though it is, that unfortunately means it can't use filters. There is a tiny metal lens hood around the front element, more for protection I imagine than anything else. There's another optional lens hood that slides on and off. However, as you can see here, it causes vignetting at any focal length wider than 16mm. The lens cap fixes onto the lens hood itself. It's a bit of a workaround, but in practice you tend to just use the lens hood and cap combined as a lens cap. The zoom ring is extremely smooth and even to turn, and so is the focus ring. The lens has full-time manual focus and the focus mechanism works quickly and quietly. However, as you can hear here, the autofocus makes some clicking noises while it micro-adjusts. That's quite typical for a Sigma lens, unfortunately. But apart from that tiny hiccup, the lens really is quite a beauty. It handles like a truly professional piece of kit. Now let's look at image quality and see if this piece of equipment has any surprises in store for us. Let's start at 8mm with a maximum aperture of f4.5. When we zoom in past my rather obvious shadow on the ground, we can see that, in the middle of the image, the picture is impressively sharp with good colours and contrast. As we look in the corners, we can see that they're also pretty sharp. Good show. Another piece of good news is that chromatic aberration is very under control for such a wide-angle lens. If you look at the contrasting edges in those windows, you'll only see a little magenta colour fringing. That's comparatively very low. Stop the lens down to f8 however, and it's largely gone, and the image is even a little sharper. Very nice. From about f11, the picture is beginning to get softer due to the physical effect of diffraction. But overall, a surprisingly great performance from the Sigma lens at 8mm. Well, let's look at the other end of the zoom range. At 16mm, the maximum aperture is now f5.6, which is quite dark really. The middle of the image, again, is super sharp with good contrast. It's clear that the corners of the image are impressively sharp too. However, the chromatic aberration on contrasting edges is just a tiny bit more pronounced. Stop the lens down to f8 and it's a little reduced, and you also get a tiny extra boost in sharpness. f11 still looks good, although again, any darker than this and you'll start getting softer images due to diffraction, which is the case with any camera lens on an APS-C camera. So overall, it's an extremely impressive performance for such a wide-angle lens. Sigma really pulled out the stops on this one. Just from the lens's sharpness, I'd have no hesitation recommending this lens for professional use. Nice. Let's look at distortion and vignetting. At 8mm, the lens is corrected for distortion in the middle of the field, but the corners display some fairly hefty barrel distortion. This only goes away once you've zoomed into 16mm, so there's a bit of a trip up when it comes to distortion. However, the lens doesn't seem to have any serious problems with vignetting or dark corners, which is good news. The lens can focus down to about 23 cm, but in presenting such wide angles, it's obviously no good for macro work. Here's the closest the lens can focus. You can see that the close-up picture quality of this lens is actually very sharp. When working against bright lights, the lens retains its contrast levels, but you do get quite piercing bits of flaring flashing around. That's a shame, because such a wide-angle lens will often pick up bright lights somewhere in its field of view. As you might imagine, this isn't exactly a camera lens designed for getting out-of-focus backgrounds, what with its wide angles and narrow maximum aperture. When you can get some narrow depth of field going, the quality of this lens's bokeh is not super smooth, but neither is it distracting in any way. Well, let's sum everything up. It's clear that Sigma are presenting us with another groundbreaking and very capable lens. The build quality is superb, the lens's optics are very sharp, and the 8mm shots you can get from this bad boy will make your photography stick out from the crowd. Getting as wide as 8mm may be this lens's only party trick, but it's one that could potentially fuel your creativity. The Sigma 8-16mm is a relatively expensive lens, but in the right hands, it can be seriously rewarding. I can highly recommend this lens for almost any wide-angle photography enthusiast.